My name is Chandler Jordan. I'm the program director of SC Economics. I am the one who pesters you via email and all other means. But it is primarily my job to support you as a teacher in both economics and personal finance. And I hope that not only will you learn some great information today, but you'll also learn that you are surrounded by a support system of fantastic teachers, and as well as a great organization, SC Economics. I may be a little biased in that statement. But I hope you guys learned some great things today. Today we've got a South Carolina financial literacy master teacher with us, Miss Sarah Ostergaard, who is going to talk to you guys a little bit about the economic questions and a lot of other great things. She's got a jam-packed presentation tonight for you guys, so we're excited to have her with us. And we're excited for you to present. Sarah, I'm going to let you introduce yourself because I feel like I will never do it justice because you're a rock star. But guys, I am going to hang out. I will be monitoring the chat, helping Sarah in any sort of way, but I will be here to answer questions. Remember, stay tuned till the end so you can get that evaluation. That is what will qualify you for the 5 webinars for $100. All right, Sarah, take it away.
Thank you, Chandler. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining us on Tuesday night. It's busy. It's kind of tiring. I'm actually trying to pull up my, there we go. You know, I loved Zoom until I've now been using Google Meet every day. So now Zoom, I was working on the refresher this morning. Okay, here we go. So hello, welcome. I know it's been a long day. I know it's been a long week. I'll skip all that and we'll get right to the content, but I wanted you to know who I am. I'm an economics teacher, usually at Irma High School, but I was reassigned to our district's virtual academy, which I'm actually really excited about. It's a new way of learning and engaging. When I was looking at the list of topics, economic systems, I was like, probably, I don't know how to make it interesting. You know what? It's actually, I just finished teaching that topic. I teach economics and government also. And this is the perfect topic to be talking about during election season. So I love teaching this. I love teaching this right now. So if you could go ahead and type where you teach in the chat, if you teach elementary, tech college, high school, I would love to know. And if you teach government economics, at first, you know, I lobbied my administration and I said, look, so many econ teachers around the state only teach economics. Wouldn't it be great? But they said, no, we really like the way we do this. But actually, economics and government fit together so nicely that I'm really an economist at heart. So I've found a way to merge them and be very happy. Okay, great. We've got middle school, high school, Gov Econ, financial literacy. Okay, great. Welcome. Let's get into the meat of it. So here's what we're going to cover today. So at the end of this, my goal is that you feel equipped to teach the 3 economic questions and the economic systems in a fun way. I like to spiral between creativity and theory. I tell my students, okay, we're in the land of theory now, and then we're going to apply it because that's what helps it solidify. We ground everything we do, of course, in the standards. My favorite part of the standards starts with the word holistically. I actually really, really like the new standards. I kind of find I didn't have to adapt a whole lot because I already was using a lot of these principles. The most important part for me is to participate in society as active and informed decision makers. I tell them that studying economics is empowering. They'll learn the way the world works, and they'll understand choice and the subsequent actions and consequences of their choices. I also tell them, by the way, I'm not actually going to teach them anything they don't know. And you should see, they're like, well, I'm not here. Like, you're living and breathing economics. You understand this. You live in the world. My students are mostly seniors. And I say, you already know a lot of this, but we're just going to make the functions and the vocabulary and the active consequences come to life for you. So it's really fun. I love teaching this. Okay, so we're in standard 1. So I pulled out the most important part for the economic systems and 3 choices, and I bolded some words for you. Evidence, inquiry, and throughout the world. So again, my favorite part is the multiple sources of information and data to analyze the advantages and disadvantages of different types of economic systems throughout the world and their outcomes on economic and societal well-being. So how do people actually live around the world? Excuse me, been talking all day virtually. Okay. So as teachers, we need agendas. What are we going to do today? Well, guess what? We can check one off already. We did the standards. So what are the 3 economic questions and why do we even care? Then we're going to jump in from there to go talk about the economic systems, because the way a society answers those 3 economic questions determines their economic system. And then I always try to make this fun. So we start with an activity. Okay, so these are the 3 economic questions. You can summarize them as what, how, and for whom. I also like to get in a little English lesson. For whom? What's the difference between who and whom? What's a preposition? They kind of look at me like I'm nuts, and I just laugh at myself. I do that a lot. I laugh at myself. So the 3 economic questions are what goods and services, how, and who, or for whom. It's the 3rd question where we can really dig our teeth in and see how people live around the world and bring that home. Sometimes, you know, the world of social media, I'm always like #perspective, and that's where we bring that in. So economics is fun. We can teach it in lots of different orders. One of the econ teachers at my school does personal finance first. I actually love personal finance. It's my favorite part to teach. And I save that for last when we're all kind of needing something really fun, because that for me is really fun. So this I do during the first part of economics. We're now just in our 4th week of school because our calendar changed. So we have 90-minute blocks. I'll spend about 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. It also depends if it's a CP class, if it's a large class, if it's an honors class. It depends. You'll know your class by the time you get to this topic. You'll know how much time you can spend on this and whether they're going to find it fun or not. So I always start before getting into the theory. Let's break it down and do something fun. So I start with an island activity. Like I told them already, they already know everything in economics. They just haven't put it together yet and realized it. So then we go over the 3 economic questions, and then we're in the land of theory. But when we're in the land of theory, we have that creative project to fall back on. And I say, oh, hey, just like you created in that island, remember when you did this and made this decision? Well, that's what can ground our theory and make it come alive for them, rather than me just talk. Well, in a market economy, this is what happens. Well, then we do go over allocation. That's really the 3rd, for whom. Do we use price? Do we stand in line? Does the government tell us? What do we do? And then my favorite part, I wrap it up with a real world application. Sometimes 2, sometimes 3, depending on the class and how they're into it. Maybe we've had a pep rally and we had to miss a class, then I might just do 1. If we're really into this and we're chugging along great, then I'll choose 2 of my favorite things. So I have a whole list of links for you at the end. So I'm gonna spend most of the time with the fun stuff at the end. So I always start with the island activity. You've probably heard of this before. They have to imagine an economic system. They're stranded on an island, that kind of thing. I always get the fun, because I teach teenagers, sorry for those of you in elementary, I always get the question, well, how are we gonna have more people? I'm like, it's not biology. You have 20 people. We're not gonna go there. And so we get a few chuckles that way. Anyway, I'll provide this link at the end, and you'll all have this, so you're gonna have this link. This is 3 to 4 class periods, but we're double blocked, so we do 2. We're also asked to do arts integration at my school. And I actually have a fun story to tell you in just a minute about the arts integration portion. So group the students together. This day and age, it's going to look different. You might be able to do breakout rooms. You might have to assign them a shared Google Doc to work together. Maybe you're in the classroom and you can make this happen. So it's all going to look very different depending on your circumstances. So they're stuck on an island, but more than just what survival do you need? You ask them questions. There's a handout. Hopefully you can read this. It asks the students the first question it asks is, what are your goals? What are your goals as a society? And choose only the most important ones. What will be produced? Will the land be privately owned? So they're thinking through these what, how, and for whom questions without realizing it yet. So they're being creative and deciding what they think will work in utopia. But they're not deciding alone, they have to do it with other people in their group. So generally the first day, they go through the scenario. Some groups rush through it, they always will. Some groups are only on the second question after about 45 minutes. So you have to balance that a little bit. But the most fun part, when you see a group starting to wrap up, you bring out the problem solving cards. They think they have it all together. Okay, what about this? So I print these on a piece of paper and I hold them out. They can't read them. Pick a card, any card. So they have some buy-in in what they're about to choose. One of them says you must come up with an energy policy. One says that your natural resources are becoming overused. So they're throwing little kinks in the armor of their perfect society. So they have to come up with solutions. So that's usually the first class. Sometimes it also lasts into the second class. It really depends on the class, but you have 2 classes to spend on this. This gets them really talking. I print multiple copies of the problem solving cards. Different groups can solve 3 or 4 of them. There's a group just whizzing through it while I just show them another problem solving card. You can judge that based on your own students. Then of course there's always a worksheet. They'll work on that the second class. And then they can either do group presentations. What I usually do, I have a lot of whiteboards in my room. I have one wall that's all whiteboard, and then I've hung 2 others. And I have the students go up and put the summaries of their islands on the board. And I leave them there. If I have to, I'll take pictures. If I have multiple classes, I'll take pictures. I try to cover them in between classes or something. But one thing, sometimes I'll have students draw posters. This is a little bit self-serving also, because at my school, when we get observed, we have to show that we have.
It's like none of these categories match. Clothing and a suitcase.
Hello.
I think one of the main things to look for to see if it covers, since it's out of the country, that's what I'm looking for. It's away from the home and it's out of the country, so I don't know.
Should I have muted her, Chandler? Is that okay?
Yep, that's totally fine.
Okay, sorry. Just kidding. So it's a little self-serving because I'm supposed to have student artwork up. So by, the 3rd week, I'm like, oh boy, I got to get some student artwork up. So they create posters. Well, I had a student, let's just call her T, give everyone a very hard time. Very hard time. We have had meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings. Well, come to find out, she's an excellent artist. And she took the lead in drawing her group's poster. That taught me that it can be valuable to take the time to do things like posters, even in the high school classroom. Her attitude changed after that. I'm not saying that I had this great, but she and I came to a better understanding, and it taught me that this type of activity, although sometimes I like to think, oh, come on, let's just move on with it. These students need some time. So drawing that poster was not a waste of time in any way for these seniors. So I do encourage you to have them draw. They drew a picture of what their island would look like, and then around the sides, They wrote the economic terms, what would happen with the factors of production, the land, the workers, that sort of thing. So they did make it economics also. They can also do group presentations if you have that type of a class. You'll know what your class needs. So the worksheet, I have them fill out. It's just a more, here, I'll show you what it is. It's just a more economic perspective that has them summarize what they came up with for their island activity. So I'm spending a lot of time describing this. Let's move on just a little bit. The point of this is they've now understood what economic systems are, but they don't know the words yet. But they now have something when I describe economic systems, they have a basis for understanding it. So that's the first two classes. Then we go into the land of theory, the 3 economic questions. What, how, and for whom. Here they are again. I haven't introduced them to the class yet, but this is what we do. We talk about this. Everything is scarce, therefore every society has to create answers to these questions. Then the reason these are important is because then this tells us what economic system the society is using. But what's an economic system? So it's a system of allocating the means of production and the goods and services in an economy based on its values and goals. We want to always ground everything in the values and goals because we're going to talk about what it means in the American system, and we're going to look at some international systems. So what are values and what are goals? And what do they have to do with economics? Well, that's what we get into. So then before this class, I've already hidden around the room some Starbursts. Now, I don't have a perfect way to do this yet, virtually. So hopefully some of you are in the classroom and able to do this, or at some point when life becomes normal, we can go back to real world. I did have one administrator, oh boy, it's being recorded, who didn't think I should give sugar. So I made sure that I did it and nobody was watching me at the time. So they're hidden around the room. If you happen to have someone near you, maybe next door, who has planning, you can expand into their room, but you may be picturing your classroom and going, how's this gonna work? Well, I did this with one of my most rowdy classes. There were 24 students, and I hid Starbursts around. They were clueless. They walked in, they sat down, and I gave a little introduction, and I said, hey, there's candy hidden around the room. Here's a 1-minute timer. How many can you find? Kind of expected a brawl, but actually, about 1/3 of the students stayed sitting down. They didn't seem to really care. And then some people raced around, and some people looked very hard. I did have them very well. There were some that were obvious, and there were some they had to work for. So what's the point of this? The point was then, I had them, I promised them, I said, look, you're gonna get candy, and look, I even have more. You're gonna get as much as you want. Just trust me for 5 minutes and don't eat it. So in all the years I've done this, I've only had one student eat the candy this whole time. And that's a typical psychological, you know, he couldn't wait, that kind of thing. So that gave me insight into that student too. So that was helpful. But they counted on their desk. If you have a small class, you can have them write the number. They counted on their desk and they say, okay. I kind of look around the room and I know how many they have. And I said, okay, I'm the government. I'm going to tell you, you can keep what you found. How do you feel about that? And they're like, yeah, that's okay. And the ones who just sat, they're still sitting there. They don't really even seem to care. And then I say, okay, next scenario. I'm the government and I'm going to take it and I'm going to redistribute it. And I actually take the candy and I redistribute it to everyone gets 2 pieces. So now they start going. The ones who hadn't done anything are sitting up a little bit. They're kind of excited. The ones who raced around the room are like, but what's going on? And so I was like, so tell me what that's like. How do you feel? Hey, you, Martin, who had 8, now you have 2. How do you feel about that? And they say what you expect. And then the ones who didn't do anything, I'm like, hey, you had none, now you have 2. How do you feel? They're like, this is great. And so we can get into a little bit of incentive, advantages, disadvantages. I'm always very careful not to get into the realm of government, not to get into socialism, communism, all those, because those words are bandied about too much. We're not, that's not the purpose of what we're doing. We're getting the fundamentals of how they feel about incentives and choices, because they can always remember how they feel about something, not necessarily what I talk to them about. So that takes a few minutes and it's fun, and then they settle down and I make sure the bags of candy get passed around and everybody gets what they want, and it's fine. And then I tell them, okay, copy this graphic organizer on your paper. I love these graphic organizers, and I didn't do it at this time, but I usually end the mini lecture with a Venn diagram. Those are fun. Those are my favorite. You know where they have the two circles that overlap? Those are my favorites. So we have to help students make the connection. So the arrows do that. I would even have them say 3 questions and then an arrow, and economic systems, and then command, market, and traditional. So by now they've done the island activity. They've gotten a little bit hyped up on sugar, and they've, you know, had their feelings jerked around a little bit. How do you feel? Is it fair? Is it not fair? And then we can get into the theory. So this is a slide I actually use. I'll fast forward it for you, as you are teachers and adults. So we talk about this. I have them copy this down, and slowly, and I don't have all my slides here for you, but slowly we unpack the different types of economic systems, and they have nice boxes where they can put the advantage, the characteristics, the advantages, the disadvantages, the examples. And then I say, okay, I've been saying there are 4 systems, but I only see 3 here. What's going on? So don't forget, we're in the land of theory right now. Now let's get into reality. Reality is a mixture. And then that's where the Venn diagram comes out, and it's really helpful. And we fill that out. If you have a smart board, or even virtually, what I do is I'll actually go kind of old school, and I have paper right here, and I'll draw it. And then we'll talk about how things overlap. We'll also do some examples here. So I'll have this on the smart board, and I'll have them call out what they think. And I'll have a student or 2 come up and underline the words for why. Well, this one's command. State planners are answering the 3 questions. And then this one happens to be market. I'm just going ahead to give you the words. I know you know this, but I'll have students come up and on the smart board underline why. Or in the virtual world, I did this and I had students unmute and tell me, or type in the chat. So they can be telling me how they got to that conclusion. And I say market economy. And then this is traditional economy. By this point, they've kind of clued into which one, process of elimination, it's going to be. And then this one, we actually spend a good amount of time, and we think of other examples. We talk about how the government regulates products that it deems unhealthy. When you're 21, you're free to buy cigarettes, but right now the government says you can't. That's a mixture. That's a mixed economy. So little by little, chipping away at these examples, we're honing in. I'm always bringing it back also to the island economy and calling their name and saying, hey, don't you remember when you made this decision, which one do you think that was? And it gets them involved. Okay, so this one, I want to show you, this is part of a poster. I couldn't fit the whole thing, it's really long. These are free resources that the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta will mail you. They'll mail you posters. This whole poster, it's called an infographic. You can order it for free, and I've laminated it. It's what I use around my room. But they're full of information. There are at least 20 of them. View this infographic. You'll see. So I usually link to this infographic, and we get to talk about it. You can see that it goes, and this one's fascinating. We talk about how do you even measure that? Heritage Foundation. In an honors class or even a CP class that really seems to be very into this, we talk about bias. How do you judge whether you're purely command or pure market? What does an 89.6 mean compared to 29.6? Anyway, I digress. One of my favorite things about the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta is that they have activities that go with these economic systems and supply and demand and other infographics. And they provide the answers. So that's wonderful too. So we have 90-minute block. We've gone over the theory, done some examples, brought it back to their island activity, and then they can work on this sheet. I have a couple of the infographics around the room, and I'll have it on the smart board in front of me. In the virtual world, we tend to work on this a little bit more together. I might assign it and they leave the meet and then they come back and we talk about it. But it has you help the students research other countries. Get outside our comfort zone a little bit. Let's think about how other countries actually live. And so we're still kind of in the land of theory. We're still in the objective, how do people live? But they're starting to put some of the pieces together. All of these should be linked at the end, or I'll make sure that you have the links. So now this is my actual favorite part. This is where we now take that theory and make it reality. So if you have some extra time, maybe you've taken the second day away from island activity, whatever. If you have some extra time, there's another great lesson on allocation, which gets to question 3, for whom? How do you allocate? How do you distribute? You could even pair this with some current events, talking about how is the vaccine, let's assume safety, but how is that going to be distributed? What do we do? Who will share in what is produced, and for whom will the good or service be produced? So this is a game. This is linked. You can read through the directions. It comes with its own set of PowerPoints. They give you everything you need. It's amazing. And it gives you the script to walk through and the student handout. So they go through these different allocation strategies and they figure out, oh, I would win that way. I like that one. I don't win that way. Which one gives me the most wins? Which one gives everybody the most wins? Which one seems fair? Why? Under what circumstances? So that's another resource that I've really enjoyed. And then we get to question 2. This is my favorite. How do people around the world live? And what does data tell us? Well, wait, what's data? They're numbers, but this is where there's a lot of choices. I try to make as much time as I can to spend time here. We can bring in trade. We can expand this economic systems and bring in international trade. You might want to take another standard and jump it in here. Another thing you're going to see, I like candy. Students like candy. So the first one there, it's a simulation. Are we better off with trade? Every time I've done this with adult learners, I've done this with teenagers, I've done this with scouts. Every time the data just lines up beautifully. I try to have 4 to 5 different types of candy, usually doing this around Halloween, so it's easy to get fun-sized candy bars. I get some good candy and some, usually kids don't like it too much candy. Make sure there's a range, right? I've already found out earlier if there's a peanut allergy and how serious it is. So if there's a peanut or nut allergy, we don't go there. But one time it actually was beautiful. We had an allergy in the class that the student said, no, it's only if I touch it and it's really mild and it's no problem. And I checked with the mom and everything was fine. So on purpose, so what you do, you have candy. You're the central authority. You randomly give the candy out. Again, you say, you gotta trust me, I've got more, don't eat it. You randomly give the candy. Someone gets a lollipop, someone gets a Snickers, someone gets different things. Well, I purposefully, sometimes by now, I know the candy preferences of the students and I'll give them what they don't like. And I have them rate whether they like the candy from 0 to 10. 10 is this is the best thing in the world. 0, I hate it. Wouldn't eat it if it were the last thing on the planet. And so we do some quick math. Like I said, I like to bring in other subjects and I talk about prepositions and that sort of thing. This is where we're talking about mental math and how important it is. And I tend to add things by 10, so I group them and we work quickly and I'm like, no calculators. And we race to get the sums. And so I say, okay, so this is how much you as a class value this candy. Now get up and trade. You can trade with anybody you want to. You don't have to trade. You can trade. The number has skyrocketed every time. Then they sit down and they tell me again, 0 to 10, how much they value the candy. And every single time that number is significantly higher. And that shows them that they're better off with trade. So it depends now where you want to take this. You can save that for your international trade lesson. You can do that here and then take a little segue and talk about trade and then come back. One of my favorite things, we're not going to take time right now for the TED Talk. I'm looking at the time. But you're going to have the link. The TED Talk talks about this. It's a very good presentation. Every time I show it, my students write a reflection and say this is one of the most meaningful things that they've ever done. This website has gone around the world and taken pictures of families and household items throughout the world. So you can see pictures and then arrange them by income. So the people on the left are the poorest. The people on the right are the wealthiest. The people in the middle are stuck in the middle. So before doing this, we talk about, I have the students write down on a piece of paper. They put down 8 stick figures that represent the 7.8 billion people in the world. And I say, okay, circle where your family fits. You're not turning this in, you're not giving it to me, you're not doing, but the putting it on paper makes them make a decision. Inevitably, most of my students think they're in the middle or in the lower portion of the economic status around the world. So then I go into I show the TED Talk, but I also go into this website and show them. So I'm just going to jump ahead. The TED Talk is really fun. She shows toilets. It's kind of a weird thing to think about, but look at that range. She also talks in her TED Talk about toothbrushes and the range. And the poorest end, people use a stick or their finger. In the middle, they share a toothbrush. And on the richer end, they have their own. They don't have to share it with grandma. And that really drives it home, that perspective of how people live around the world. So that's the how people live, but we're still working on the why. How do we put this together? What does it have to do with economic systems? Well, there's an Index of Economic Freedom website. I show the students this. This was actually active. There we go. I was just closing some tabs and now it's going better. So this graphs any of these down here. Overall score of economic freedom in the country. I like to go to business freedom. Now you can Google ahead of time, you can look on the website and see what's incorporated, how they measure it. You can look into that. I'm not going to stand here and sit here and tell you how that works. But know what components are in this first. And then I have students, someone type in the chat, please. Give me a name of a country. Or unmute and let me know. I lost my chat box.
India.
India, thank you. India. Go over here and select India and it will magically graph that for you compared to the rest of the world. So that's business freedom. So we go through that and they name a couple countries. I like to also compare government spending, government integrity. Then it's on their own. I tell them to choose the world and 2 countries that interest them. I want them to copy the graph, and then I want them to do their best to think about why that country is above or below average. So we're starting to hone into the why. This is still kind of big picture, but it's getting them to put the connection between ways of life, economic systems, choices, incentives, and how they all work together on the macro scale. Something actually during, this is something I'm going to do once we go over GDP. There's a word I just learned over the pandemic, and we had a little time last spring, I guess. I listened to a podcast, and they interviewed a PhD student that put data to music. So they had a short snippet, they call it sonification, of what unemployment data was like from February to June, and then what it was like during the recession in 2009. So I'm just going to play it as 9 seconds. So if you listen to the whole podcast, they actually play a longer segment of it, and you can hear that things are fairly even, and then COVID, and it gets jagged. So I was talking with an arts, one of the band teachers at school, saying, how do I do this? How do I do this? Especially if someone plays an instrument, well, then they could do this. They could, you know, write music and do it, but I want this applicable to everybody. There's this really cool app that I'm going out on a limb here. I haven't done this one yet with students, but I plan to very soon. That will, it's fairly easy to use. Here's an example, an economics example, the temperature of the US economy. You can listen to the data, US debt to GDP ratio, set to piano music. And it shows you down here, you can hear the data. So it's up to you, and you know your class, if you'd like to give a couple different ideas. If a couple of kids are not into music, this is going to be like pulling teeth, but this could be part of your toolbox, right? The fallback, I feel like, is always you could create a skit. They could create a skit of the different economic systems. I have props around the room. I have some fake money. They can still do this now. They could record it. They could record it as a MP4. They could do Flipgrid, they could do all kinds of recordings. They can personify, they can take on the character of, say, Adam Smith or Karl Marx. They could take on different characters and create some kind of a skit or do a debate. Actually, I had to write a lesson plan this afternoon that incorporated using Flipgrid. And what I decided to do was have a debate between Adam Smith and Karl Marx. Now, they didn't live at the same time, but imagine that they did. How would they convince each other? What would they say to each other? So you could have students do that. Okay, I've talked long. I'm going to show you one more thing. This is something I've done every year also. Whoops. It's always fun when you can create your own data. So I'm going to make this bigger so you can see it. We have an area in our school that kind of is big, or if it's a nice area, I might go outside. It takes a lot of work to call attendance, put a note on the door. One time I didn't do that and someone freaked out because they couldn't find me. I'm learning those things. Each school is a little different. But we're creating our own production possibilities frontier by creating footballs or baseballs, by crumpling up paper. And they stand in a circle and they pass it. And I time it for 30 seconds. And I give them different scenarios. Well, fast forward, this creates data. So we can talk about put one arm behind your back and pass the paper. That represents a decrease in production. What might happen in your country that causes that? And so we go through different scenarios and we put this on the board and they've created their own data. So getting the student involved in this as much as possible really brings it home. I think the study of economics is also so fun because we can get the students involved in doing these things that we only have to talk about the theory for just a little while. And then the rest of it unveils itself as we go through something fun to do. Okay. I wrote in there an op-ed piece. Something I've done with adults is have them actually submit an op-ed to the Washington Post. You can do that. I think in the high school, we need to get parent permission to do that, but that's not difficult. For you elementary and middle school teachers, I want to put and plug in for SC Economics. They have a great drawing contest. And that's an excellent way. You could have them draw an economic system. So I wanted to give you, thanks, I just saw the chat. Okay, it's 7:40. I'm going to paste into, now you're gonna see my little cheat here. I had all the links right here that I wanted to be able to give you immediately. So I'm going to paste all of these into the chat.
Sarah, if you don't mind, it might be easier if I just go ahead and share your slide deck.
Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
That's great.
So right now I am putting in the chat is a direct link to Sarah's slide deck. And I think we're on slide, what is it, 26 or 27 where the resources are?
Yep.
If you guys will click that link, that should get everyone to the slide deck. No spoilers now that we're pretty much through. And I'll let you kind of take over the instructions for there. But if you guys will find, we're on slide, like I said, 27 is going to be the list of options. She's going to give you some options to take a few minutes to dive deep in.
So it's 7:41. Let's come back at 7:44. Let's take 3 minutes. And I would love for you to just choose one of these. Look into them a little bit. And I'd like to hear from you. You can type in the chat. You can unmute and let us know. What would you use in your classroom? Do you have to change it to make it work virtually? Pick one of these that interests you and research it a little bit more on your own. Thanks.
Perfect. All right, guys, if you'll take 3 minutes, I will announce when the timer is up. That's my favorite thing to do, is to time. So, all right, 3 minutes on the clock. Take some time, dive into whatever speaks to you.
Dollar Street, plan to use a visual representations from the different countries around the world. Yeah, the Dollar Street, I would like for you to watch the TED Talk. And then you can either use, yeah, I love Dollar Street. You can show the TED Talk and then have them explore the Dollar Street and write a reflection on it. What did they learn? How does it have to do with anything? Every time it's been impactful. And remember to tie everything back to the Heritage Foundation Graphic Good, the why, those 3 questions, the what, the how, and the for whom. The for whom is the most interesting one where we really can explore. I've decided to take the how also. I'm changing the order, and we're going to talk about businesses really soon and have students take off with the regulations involved with starting a business they're interested in, that sort of thing. Dollar Street looks really interesting. Sonification, cool. So thank you. There we go. Chandler, is this where you talk about this?
Yeah, I'll take over. Well, first of all, Sarah, thank you so much. You actually showed a lot of things today that I haven't even seen, so I'm super excited. I never even thought about the sonification, so I think that is something really cool. And I know that you guys probably, just along with me, we always have those students that it's just so hard to get to them. And so that is it's a unique idea, and I really appreciate you sharing that with us. Also, you brought in this Atlanta Fed infographic resources. If you guys don't know about that, let me tell you, that is the place to go. I know as economics, personal finance teachers, any of those subject matters, we always struggle to find like cutesy classroom decorations. Well, they have over 20 infographics, and they will send them to you for free. On top of that, every infographic has a lesson plan. And so that's just the Atlanta Fed. Granted, that's not our Fed. We can still use the resources. So they're great about sharing those. You can go directly to Atlanta Fed website, click on education, you'll get that information. But also don't exclude any of the other Feds. St. Louis has some fantastic things as well. So if you're digging for resources, or reach out to me, I'll help make you connect those. But anyways, Sarah is, as I introduced her earlier, she is part of the South Carolina Financial Literacy Master Teacher Program. She's a part of our original cohort. She is in her 2nd year in the program. And so the coolest part about her being here with us tonight is she is actually incentivized to do this. And so through the program, she gets the opportunity to lead professional development, such as tonight. and she gets paid for it.
I actually forgot. I was looking forward to this so much. I actually forgot about that until yesterday. I was like, oh,
look at that.
Cool.
So, no, that's so perfect. And so
but it's important. Don't get me wrong.
yes, it's obviously, we're generally economists, and so we know incentives matter, and so we want to make sure that you guys know about this program. We will start taking applications in January for cohort 3. Your first year, you have the eligibility to earn up to $500. Your second year, $1,000, and your third year is $1,500. So that's a total of $3,000 over the course of 3 years for simply leading professional development, like Sarah did tonight. Whether it's with SC Economics or if it is at your school or district, all of those things count, which a lot of you are already doing with no payment involved. So it's a great way to get incentivized for all of those efforts. And then in addition, we incentivize you for attending PD just like tonight. Speaking of attending PD and getting some incentivization, as you guys know, SC Economics is incentivizing anyone who attends 5 or more sessions with us this fall. I have just dropped the evaluation link into the chat. So if you guys will take a few minutes and make sure that you guys fill out that evaluation. That is how we are tracking that. Number 1, you were live with us tonight through the Zoom registration. And number 2, you did the appropriate follow-up with the evaluation form. So again, I just dropped that in the chat. In addition, because Sarah is again a South Carolina Financial Literacy Master Teacher, you're going to get in a follow-up email along with all of these great resources, links to her presentation, which you guys have, but we'll send it out again. And we are going to send you out another way that you can earn an additional $100 by teaching a financial literacy lesson in your classroom. And that applies to everyone in this chat, or everyone in this session, even if you already are a South Carolina Financial Literacy Master Teacher, because I see a couple of you out there, not to call out Denise or Desiree or Tanika. So that all goes with you. So make sure you guys look for that follow-up email, not only for the information that it attains, but also that additional opportunity to earn some cash. All right, I need to calm down the caffeine. Any other questions for tonight? Sarah, got anything else you want to wrap up? Are we good?
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you in more of these. Thank you for being here.
Absolutely. All right, well, I will hang out in case there are any questions. Again, the evaluation is in the chat. Take a few minutes to fill that out.